Guten Tag allerseits, and welcome to another Death's Oath video. And in this video I will be taking you through everything that you need to know if you're looking to actually league start with this build for the 3.20 Forbidden Sanctum League. In this video, I will be going over the forum guide, which is still viable even though the endgame versions hasn't been fully updated, but I will update that soon, so don't be alarmed. I will also talk about the nerfs and changes to Death's Oath and the skill tree and the malediction changes and the curse changes. We will be going over the path of buildings for both the endgame mapping version and also the endgame bossing version, and see what has changed in the skill tree, and also what the changes to Volcanic Arrow is going to do to our damage and stuff like that. And we're going to talk a little bit about how much they cost now, because they have actually been buffed build wise because they are now cheaper to make. And I will also talk about the upcoming league and the big changes that is coming to the Atlas tree, and how can that potentially benefit us in a large way, because we thrive the more content that is in maps, and the changes to the Atlas tree that we've seen so far is pretty damn big. So let's start off with having a look at the build guide that I have made on the forum that is still very viable. I have not added the 3.20 updates yet. I will do that as soon as this video is done, and I will also showcase there what the actual changes are, and I will also put in the new video here for the people who don't really see that otherwise than on the forum. Anyway, so here in the guide we still have all the normal stuff that we had before, pros and cons, that basically explains what the build is good at, what it's bad at. We have some information about the build and videos and stuff like that that I will be updating as well. You have a leveling stage from Act 1 to 10, including path of buildings and pantheon choices, skill trees, leveling gear, gem skills, all the stuff that you need. And I also have stage 1, 2, and 3 to take you through early mapping, mid-game mapping, and also end-game mapping and bossing, if that's something that you're interested in later on as well. I will be updating this build the next week or so. Hopefully I have enough time for that, you know, gotta pair it with school and everything, but I'll be updating some of these things here, and I will also be adding a stage 4 version that has a pure bossing version and a pure endgame version with the changes that I made last league. And that's something that I will talk about in this video a little bit as well, because I'm making changes this league as well, of course. So let's first talk a little bit about the changes that is coming to the build, and specifically right now we're going to look at the mapping version. So GGG announced that they are changing curses and all that stuff, but I already talked about that in a previous video, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in forum guide as well, so I'm going to skip that for now. But basically what's happening is that they are removing some of our powerful utilities in our ascendancy, and they're also removing some curse effectiveness, and also just the power of the despair curse. But don't be alarmed, because we actually don't lose that much damage, and single target wise it's gonna make up for that with the Volcanic Arrow. Now, here's the new changed path of building for the mapping version, and even though it says we have about 317,000 DPS, that is not correct. Path of building has not yet updated the skills, so if you go here and look at the auras, it says that Despair still gives cursed enemies take 25% increased damage from damage over time effects. That is not true anymore. GGG have removed that, and instead we are completely losing that, but the cursed enemies have 29% chaos resistances is now going up to 30% instead, and whenever you have quality it's just going to add curse effectiveness. That's why I removed the quality from here, and you can kind of calculate how much our true damage is supposed to be. If 10% increased damage from damage over time effects is about 18k DPS, as you can see here, we're gaining 18k by adding 20% quality, which is basically 10% increased damage from damage over time effects, blah blah. We can kind of calculate that our true damage is supposed to be somewhere around maybe 270,000-280,000 DPS after the changes, because we will still have a little bit of increased effect of curses through the new quality instead. So we're losing a little bit of damage for map clearing, but going from like 320k DPS to down to 280k something is not really that big of a deal. Most things are just going to pop anyway, and now when we have 50% chance to explode instead of 40% chance to explode on Profane Bloom, explosions are going to be a little bit more powerful as well, and you're not really going to notice that 40k DPS loss, because as long as one enemy die, the whole pack explodes, and if you just throw in some caustic arrows on rare enemies, sometimes they're just going to die super easy as well. So I don't really think that this will negatively affect us in any way whatsoever. Other than that, the path of building is basically the same in terms of gear and everything. The only change that I've done is based on feedback. I have now removed uncompromising, so you don't have to spend money on getting that, but we are now going to use Eldritch Battery if that is something that you want to do. If you don't want to use Eldritch Battery, which will cost you one more skill point, and you still want to spend some money and getting uncompromising, then you can do that. But I would say the best option right now is going for Eldritch Battery and then using another jewel here in this jewel slot instead to gain more damage, more defenses, or whatever that you may want. And as I also stated earlier, the changes to curses and the changes to the Occultist Ascendancy will also change how our bossing version will look right now as well. And based on some calculations that I've been doing in path of building, looking at the old path of building and the new path of building, according to my calculations, which can be very off because I'm not really a math guy, I just want to put that out there, my calculations show that we have gone from 4.1 million DPS up to 5 million DPS now after the changes, because endgame bosses do not have curse reduction anymore. So we are gaining DPS if you have a 2120 caustic arrow. Now, the big change here though is if you are using a Vol caustic arrow, and if you have a 2020 Vol caustic arrow, because I do believe that 2120 is going to be very expensive because caustic arrow is going to be very popular in this league. So I'm only calculating this with a 2020 Vol caustic arrow, which is basically 2.4 times the damage of what you normally would have. Then our Vol caustic arrow damage will be 10.8 million DPS, which is a massive single target boost, and we're gonna have a little bit closer look at that in the path of building right now as well. So here is the bossing version of the Death's Oath, and it is basically the same gear as I had last league, and that video can be found on my YouTube along with the mapping version and other videos that I have as well regarding the build. So the skill tree has been changed for this one as well. Last league we had a lot of small cluster jewels that gave us a lot of damage, and we were also utilizing the uncompromising jewel, but now we will be playing Eldritch Battery here as well. So you can see that we have 2% unreserved mana, 19 unreserved mana to use, but that's not a problem because we're going to play Eldritch Battery for this version as well based on feedback. And I do believe that this is somewhere where Eldritch Battery is going to perfectly fit in, instead of having a jewel that reduces the mana reservation of our where is it now again? Determination. So yeah, that's the first change I want to put out there, is that the skill tree is going to look a little bit different, meaning that instead of getting all these small cluster jewels, and instead of getting the intuitive leap here, which was a mistake last league, absolutely, we're now going to have it like this, which will make the build a lot cheaper, because you don't have to buy all these jewels that can be somewhat expensive, and you don't have to have an intuitive leap and stuff like that. And instead we're going to put those skill points into going back into corruption, because that is a big DPS boost. And secondly, as we have talked about earlier, is that the despair changes will remove the cursed enemies take 25% increased damage from overtime effects, so you can kind of calculate that yourself. 10% gives about 200k, we're losing 35%, so you can kind of calculate how that's going to look like in the DPS, and I've already done all that stuff as well. But what we're really looking at, as I said earlier, caustic arrow, 21 million DPS. Now, the reason why it is like that is because we're losing the quality from despair here, but we're gaining a new form of quality, which is going to be increased effect of curses. I think that's going to make up a little bit for the damage loss of despair. So that's why I calculated that we're still going to have around maybe 4.5 to probably upwards towards 5 mil DPS even after the changes against bosses. As you can see here, this is a Guardian / Pinnacle boss. And also, if you have Vol Caustic Arrow 2020, then you remove one level from this, and you take 4.5 million DPS times 2.4 and you will get 10.8 million DPS, which is what I believe we will have somewhere around there at least with Volcast Gyro, which is going to be absolutely insane for endgame bossing with this build now. I already took down certain endgame bosses last league, as you can see in my previous video about that from last league, and this league, if we basically have almost double the damage, or basically double the damage, then that is going to be very, very interesting, because I do believe that we can go even further into endgame and kill some even harder bosses this time, which is something I will be trying out this league. Now, lastly, a really important thing that I want to talk about as well is, of course, the changes that they're making to the Atlas tree. And from my experience of playing this build for about 3 leagues now, the more content we have, the more this build excels. Because we want a lot of monsters in big packs, because when one explode, they basically all explode, and you can just walk across the entire map and everything just pops. It's really satisfying, and what makes the build a lot of fun to play and really good to play in my opinion as well. So we want a lot of content. And looking at this, for example, I have Invasion, which makes it possible to have like 10 additional breaches, 1 additional breach, 2, 3 additional breaches. Having this could potentially make your maps absolutely insane, and we don't even know how all the other nodes of all the other forms of content and past leagues are going to look like, but looking at this can be pretty nutty. And when you pair this with something like otherworldly artifacts, where rare breach monsters in your maps have a chance to drop additional breach blessings, and having a chance to drop breach unique items, this is very interesting, because last league, after the changes to how loot drop work in Path of Exile, people were saying that breaches were really bad to farm. I still really enjoyed breaches because it works perfectly for this build, and seeing these 2 nodes now, I just can't wait to see what all the other stuff is gonna look like. And remember, the more content, the more stuff, the better this build excels. Except if you go into delirious maps that are too delirious. Last league, I was doing 4 to 60% delirious without any issues. I was not dying. I was clearing the entire map. I was even killing the 2 delirious unique bosses without any issues. If you just take it easy sometimes with Krotos, whatever his goddamn name is, Crouton. But I was able to do it, and it was a lot of fun. So if you're doing like 40% delirious maps and doing stuff like this, you're gonna have absolutely no issues. And seeing this, for example, just gets my heart pumping, because I just want as much content as I can get in my maps, because then my character really excels at farming. And that's one last thing I want to talk about as well. I know a lot of people ask me in my videos about what Atlas tree I'm using for the certain video, and that's something I failed in the past to actually put in my videos, is that like, hey, for this video I was using this Atlas strategy, I was having this Atlas tree. It's something that I added to some videos at the end, but I didn't add it to all my videos. So going forward, I will do my best to update every single video that I put out with every build I put out there, to know exactly what Atlas tree I'm using for that video, in case you guys are interested in trying to do what I do, or if you guys think that like, hey, that looks pretty good, you have a look at the Atlas tree, you change it up to find something that's fitting for you, then that's perfect. But yeah, going forward, I will be updating a lot more of my videos with the actual Atlas tree that is being used for that video. And once again, thank you very much for watching the video. I hope you have a great league start and you enjoy this league. If you need any help with the build, feel free to come over to my Twitch channel at twitch.tv/burgerbrush when I'm streaming. You can also jump in my Discord and ask any questions there, or just ask on the forum as well. And yeah, thank you very much once again. And I'll serve the...